Thanks for joining me for 3 things I like about Hallertau. I am, admittedly, a big Uwe Rosenberg fan, and this game doesn't disappoint. I actually think, even though the box says expert level, that this game is pretty straightforward and simple. Now, I know that might sound crazy, particularly because it comes in a big box. There are lots of bits, and there's a lot of boards. So everyone has their own individual field board. They have their own building board that they have all of their workstations, and they keep progressing to the right. And there's just other things, right? Like the round tracker and card stacks and stuff. Player reminders. There are 10 phases each round. Okay, so maybe it's not as simple as I think it is, maybe because I've played a lot of Rosenberg games and because I've just played a lot of Euro games. It seems so clean and streamlined to me. So once you've played the game, you got it. Like, you really do figure it out. And it's actually, in my mind, the streamlined part of it comes from you have your actions, and all of these actions are going to give you resources, fields, and all sorts of things that help you just move your house. And all you want to do is move this house. And that's it. That's the track. And once you get your house moved up, it continues to reveal things behind the window, giving you more action points, and also giving you more victory points. So maybe that's where I think it's pretty streamlined. There aren't that many steps to transmute this, to get that, to do that. And these cards, I'll talk about the cards. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm so excited to talk to you about Hallertau. So what I want to do, though, is just share with you my 3 favorite things. Now, that means that I'm not going to teach you the game here. I am not going to do all of the ins and outs, but I do want to highlight those 3 features of the game that I just really dig. So the very first thing I really like is this action board. Now, there are several things that come into play when I talk about the action board. One of them is the action cubes. So each player is going to receive a certain number of action cubes that they see in their personal player board. This building is going to move, and it's going to reveal a number, and that's where you are, and that's exactly how many actions you get per round. There are 6 rounds. That's it. Seems like a pretty straightforward short game, but each round you're placing these action cubes out until you run out of action cubes, and then you spend all your resources to move your building to the right. So every player is going to start with 6. In a 1 to 3 player game, that the lowest space you could possibly go in each of these action areas is taken by an action cube. So if I want to go to one of these actions, let's say I want to cultivate, I want to seed 2 of my fields, I have to put 2 cubes to go there. That means that my opponent must put 3 cubes to go there if they want to do the exact same action. So for me, the way this action board works makes me feel like you don't completely block other players. It just makes it that much more expensive to go. And expensive in the terms of action cubes. If you have no action cubes, you can't go somewhere. So if it takes 2 to go somewhere, or 3, and you have 1 left, you can't go in those places because you're restricted because of your action cubes. So I like that you're not totally blocking players unless someone goes there and puts 3, and then that place is blocked. Also, in a 1 to 3 player game, you will have these cards. They're called quadrant cards, and you draw them, and what they do is they tell you in a 1, 2, or 3 player game how many of these cubes and from what quadrant they are removed from. So starting the very next round, you might have this quadrant clear up, which means you can get these actions for 1. Only 1 cube, not 2 and not 3, which puts the priority on players in player turn order to really make good decisions. I like that. I like it so much. So you have to really prioritize, and you're looking at what your opponents are doing to see, is it likely that they're going to want to seed this time, or are they going to want to grab bricks, or do they want to butcher their sheep to get some lamb shanks and some meat steaks? I'm not sure what the difference is. Apparently the lambs make both bone-in and slabs of meat. That is pretty cool. There are those cards, the quadrant clearings, that really work in a 1 to 3 player game, but it's kind of randomized. Now, in a 4-player game, you don't start with 1 cube on every one of these spaces, and at the end of every round, you clear the topmost from every space on the board. So things really open up a little bit, but that's because there are so many players putting cubes out. So there's this really great mechanism of placing cubes based on what you want to do and where you want to go. But then there's this system that clears the topmost space, the action space. So it doesn't clear an entire square. So let's say my opponent went to cultivation as well. If this quadrant came up to clear, we would go clear topmost row, topmost, 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 right? So it doesn't fully clear an area, it just gives it a little bit of space to breathe and allows at least one person to go to a space the next round, or whenever they have those available action cubes. The other cool thing about these action spaces is that you're not going to certain spaces early on in the game. They're kind of like middle or late game locations. And that means that there are places that are more advantageous to go to early on in the game, and they become less valuable as the game continues. I like that as well because of the clearing mechanism. And so if you're not going to a space right now, that means it will most likely clear fully by the time you really want to go there, in which you will just have to pay 1 action cube to go to that space, which is a great, great deal. Now, let's say you have just 1 cube left and there's no place to go for 1 cube space. Or you choose to spend more of your action cubes and trade them out for tools. Tools are really, really helpful in the clearing of these rocks and doing other things that relate to your cards. So if you have these, then you can actually trade them out for victory points too. These tools are really helpful, and it makes you feel like your action cubes are never wasted. Even if you have 1 left over, you're like, well, I can't go on the board, but you can trade it in for a worker tool. So, so, so cool. I love it. I like this. I like this board. I like the way it works. There are only 2 spaces to go and get these cards. And speaking of the cards, that takes me to my second point, which is I like the cards. The cards are really cool. They vary in how hard they are to achieve and the bonuses that you get, all the way to end game victory point scores. There are 4 different decks of gateway cards. You have beginner, advanced, expert, and master. And you can play with any of those decks. Obviously in the first game, play with beginner. There are also 4 different farmyard card decks to play with, which is great because you can play the game again and again and exchange those decks for different cards. And you're playing with the same game, but you have different objectives. And then the other 2 decks that you're going to have in the game are bonus and point cards. Why would you go to one over the other? Some of them are a little bit easier and some of them are ongoing benefits. Some of them are just one time you get the thing. Some cards say if you have certain things then you get certain things. Some say you have to exchange items or goods for those benefits or bonuses. Honestly, you should try out all the decks. And you should, when you're playing, actually go to these deck card areas almost as often as you can. When I played, I was not getting the cards out on the table as fast and as efficiently as my opponent, and I felt like I was really getting left in the dust. I thought the cards were really great though, and I cannot wait to give it another try with some of those other decks that I mentioned. The cards are super, super cool. It adds another layer to this game. Action area and action points. The cards. The cards are a whole nother really, really cool component to the game. The third thing I really like about Hallertau is how resources are managed and how you grow them in your field board and then how you use those resources to advance your building on your other track. It's all connected, so it's really hard to talk about just one and not other things. But here's how the resources work. When you have resources, you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and then if you want to have more, you just keep track of them that way. So you have multiple, you have multiple grains, and you just move your grain up. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, well, great. Then I have 3, and then I have 1 on 5. That means I have 8. That's it. It's just super simple math. And when you want to grow something, let's say I have 3 of them, I move my marker down to 2, and then I put a grain out on where I was planting. And now I have, planted a grain right here. And when I harvest it, it's going to be worth 3. That's awesome. It's so cool. And when you harvest your fields, they depreciate, but there are ways to raise the value of your fields in which you harvest them, and then they're going to be worth 5 instead of 3 or 2. Oh, don't get those fields all the way down to nothing. You're going to start out with a 1, 2, and a 3 field. You also have enough space here for 8 fields. It's the neatest track. It's so smart, and it's so simple, and again, streamlined. It's not hard to manage, it's not hard to maneuver, and everyone has their own space, and so you don't have to worry about anybody else's fields and what they're doing and these little bits and cutie bit bops. I love these things so much. So then, at the end of the round, you are going to brew and go to the carpentry and go to the cooling house and bake and manufacture, and you're going to be trading in your resources based on the requirement to move your buildings forward. So if you move your brew house, your carpentry, cooling house, bakehouse, manufacture over one space all, then you're going to be moving your building over, and your building is going to start to reveal things underneath it through that little window. And so the whole goal is you want to keep moving everything, and you want to keep paying to the brew house. You want to have your hops, and you want to turn in your grain and your barley. You want to turn in bricks and little meat shanks and milk. And then there's sheep. I didn't even talk about the sheep because, again, I can't talk about everything. There's a lot going on in Hallertau. But all of this makes the game very replayable. And once you've played it the first time, it makes it faster and it makes it more fun because everyone has kind of figured out some strategy. They may be trying new strategies. It's just so engaging, and again, I can't emphasize how clean and clear and easy this game really is. It just comes down to the plethora of choices, picking your best option on your turn when you have your action cubes, and then making sure that you move your building as far and as fast as you can to get more action cubes, to get the most victory points, and to hopefully best your opponent. So, thank you, Uwe Rosenberg, for yet another agriculture-themed strategy game. Cool.